Left of the box. Recently, I covered a story in my last news live stream about how Doug Ford is doing the yes and when it comes to encampments. So a lot of the provinces across the country are starting to make it so that they can force people into treatment. But here, Doug Ford wants to be able to use the notwithstanding clause to strip away the rights of people in encampments so that they can just be rounded up and thrown in jail, no treatment necessary. Just strip away their rights so they can be locked up. And 13 big city mayors wrote a letter to Doug Ford saying, please, can you do this? Can you put that notwithstanding clause to and throw the people in my city into jail because they are living in an encampment because they can't afford rent and I'm not supplying them with any shelters and, we're not doing our jobs. We've tried nothing and we're out of ideas. So can you please just round them up and throw them away? I was actually surprised to find out Toronto was not on that list. And I only say that because Olivia Chow, she got into office, mayor of Toronto, on a more progressive platform, but then she kind of fell flat on a lot of it. Like she was more, I'm not going to fund the cops the same way. And then she absolutely funds the cops the same way. I'm going to be more sensitive to encampments. And then she helped make sure that some encampments were completely erased off the map. So I was actually kind of surprised that she wasn't calling for this. So Toronto mayor rejects using notwithstanding clause to clear encampments.
How should cities in Ontario handle encampments like this one? Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow says if force is used to move inhabitants, they'll just go somewhere else. Toronto says the solution is to build shelters, not to use legislation. Flanked by faith leaders, Mayor Olivia Chow makes a pitch to Torontonians to accept new homeless shelters.
It's easy to be overcome by fear, but don't let that take over. We, as Torontonians, are better than that.
The gathering of clergy is part of a push by the city to prepare residents for the opening of new shelters. Staff is currently selecting those sites. In an exclusive, City News recently revealed one location in Scarborough.
And again, I covered this in my last stream, that there are people terribly upset that there's going to be a shelter in their area. How dare they? And they want all the encampments gone as well. They want the encampments gone, but they refuse to have shelters in their areas. And that's every area will refuse to have a shelter in their area, but they want the encampments gone. How exactly is that going to work? The shelters have to be built, and they're being built near resources, places that people can go to for assistance, the soup kitchen, access to transit, all that sort of stuff. And so if you want people out of encampments, you need to be okay with shelters being built.
Along Gerrard Street East,
I would rethink that decision at this point.
the local councillor is opposed to the site, and area residents have already begun to organize to try and stop it. The mayor's response?
Driven by fear because of change, because we are worried, and sometimes we are led by people that want to divide us.
The mayor says a lack of shelter space is directly related to the number of encampments. It's not just a Toronto problem. Municipalities across the province are struggling with the issue. In 2023, an Ontario court ruling said that the clearing of an encampment would violate the charter rights of inhabitants. The Premier, who is considering using the notwithstanding clause, had this to say to Ontario mayors.
The big city mayors actually put in writing that they want the province to change the homeless program, make sure that we move the homeless along.
More than
That is just so dehumanizing language right there. That we just move the homeless along to where? You know, there's all this talk down in the States about, oh, you shouldn't be calling people like garbage. Well, guess what? You shouldn't be treating people like garbage either. And that's exactly what the Conservative government here is doing.
than a dozen mayors have signed on. Olivia Chow is not one of them.
We evict people from tents, from camps. They go to a ravine. You go to a ravine, if you move them, they go to a park. You take them out of a park, they go into TTC subway system.
Among those signing the letter encouraging the use of the notwithstanding clause, the mayors of Brampton and Barrie, Oshawa, and Oakville, and Windsor. They and others want the government to use legislation so that the courts are not the ones to dictate policy on encampments.
So how do we fight against this? How do we organize? See, the thing is that a lot of people, they talk out of fear, they talk out of ignorance, they don't know this, they don't know what else can be done, they don't know what the government should be doing and hasn't done and all this sort of stuff. So unfortunately, it's part of organizing means also educating the public. And Diana Chan McNally did a brilliant job of this at a town hall meeting talking about this. And she's spoken out against Doug Ford's use of the notwithstanding clause when it comes to encampments and stuff before, that I featured in my last news live stream. And so here she is talking at a town hall meeting, and this is the type of things that people actually need to do when it comes to organizing. You have to be bold. You have to be willing to stand up in front of a crowd who might not like you and talk to them in a way that they might be receptive. Basically, you can't just go up there and call them stupid or hateful people, but you have to try to educate them.
I was kicked out of my house as a teenager, and I've been homeless. I was kicked out of my house as a teenager, and I've been working with people who live in encampments for years now. I'm not always happy with how the city reacts, but I know that the issue is housing, ultimately. And we have had a provincial government who has done nothing about the crisis that we're living in right now. Now, we know that there are tools that exist. The Premier, for example, has failed to commit funding for encampments. So be aware that there was money on the table that he refused because he doesn't care about this issue. He is also failing to build housing. He is not even going to make 50% of his own housing targets. And that means that we're going to see more and more people outside, which is a safety issue for all of us. Now, I may be on one side of this issue. I have particular politics. There are people in this room who have different opinions. That's okay. That's okay. But we have to acknowledge that there will be people outside until we have housing for them. So I want to ask the city, the people here, that we know that there are tools that exist. We know that the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, for example, we can get people right out of encampments, out of shelters and into housing. And we also know that there's this encampment funding that we should get, but our Premier is not asking for. How can we help to get these tools that we need to bring people indoors into housing where they need to be and what they deserve?
Educating the people and letting them know where the blame actually lies.